Now from the front, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra has a pretty manageable looking screen, 6.73 inches, so a little bit smaller than the Galaxy S24 Ultra and Oppo Find X7 Ultra. But this thing is still an absolute chunk when you look at that camera bump around the back. It feels really premium though. When you have it in the hand, you're touching this aluminium frame, and its flat sides make it easy to grip. Around the back, the metal curves into vegan leather. It's available in two colors, black and white. I've obviously got the black one. Now the camera bump is thin. It definitely isn't the skinniest phone on the block, and that isn't even including that camera bump. At least Xiaomi's made it look very good. It's got a gold accent and almost an aperture ring style kind of track around it. And so it's definitely a statement piece around the back. The phone's not the curved glass, curved on all sides and corners. It's actually reminiscent of an Apple Watch. Now, if you swipe in from the left, right, top, bottom, it feels very smooth, and that ties in nicely with Android swipes and gestures. So that's cool. Now, there is scratch the display just a little bit. It's really small, hairline scratch at the bottom. You can't even see it on camera, but when you slide your fingernail over it, you can feel it and you can see it when the screen's off. My point is, yes, this is more drop resistant, but it still scratches. So if you want the most immaculate display possible, make sure that you leave that screen protector on. The screen specs read really well, and that translates to a real-world use too. It's a 6.73-inch OLED panel, WQHD plus resolution with 522 pixels per inch means everything looks very sharp, and it's easy to see outdoors. Now, the peak 3000 nit brightness is in HDR mode. Day to day, you're probably going to interact with nearer 1000 nit max brightness, but I didn't have any trouble viewing it outdoors. Indoors, it got very nice and dim as well, and with 1920 Hz PWM dimming, everything also looks very comfortable. Not best in class in every respect, but still really competent. Smooth too, 1 to 120 Hz adaptive refresh rate. And it's also Amazon, Netflix, and YouTube certified for HDR content. 12-bit color depth. There really is nothing to complain about here. And if you dive into the settings, you can also customize the display properties to suit your tastes. The phone also has stereo speakers, one at the bottom, one at the top, and they're really nice and loud and expansive, but this phone's much better when you're not holding it, because when you're holding it in landscape, especially for gaming, it's very easy to cover them up. What makes this phone really stand out is that camera, and the main camera in particular is where the cutting edge technology lies. It's the 1-inch Light 900 sensor from Sony. This is the same sensor used on the Oppo Find X7 Ultra. 1-inch 50 megapixel, excellent starting point, but what you also get is an f1.6 to f4 stepless variable aperture. These blades that control that aperture are 55 microns, super thin, and also this is a Summilux lens, taking Leica's imaging beyond the processing into the hardware. So it's no wonder that this camera performs incredibly. The secondary cameras also really impressed me. The ultra wide at 12mm, the telephoto at 75mm, and the periscope at 120mm. All of these have IMX858 sensors. Now that's good, there's consistency there. All 50 megapixels across all four cameras. And Xiaomi's also opened up the aperture across the telephoto cameras too, which is really great. But I wasn't too enthralled by the fact that they haven't got the biggest sensors on the block. Thankfully though, I had nothing to worry about. By increasing the aperture of the 75mm camera to f1.8 and the 120mm camera to f2.5, Xiaomi's been able to combine that with its newest image processing to deliver incredibly good shots, zoomed in and with nearest macro focus distances on this camera of 30 centimeters from the furthest reaching camera, 10 centimeters from that 75mm camera. This is a ridiculously versatile camera phone. Now, I can't talk about the Xiaomi 14 Ultra camera without talking about the photography kit. This thing isn't cheap, £179, but it completely transforms the physical experience of using this phone. Now, what does it add? A 1500 milliamp battery, so that's excellent for a day out shooting. You also get a zoom lever, a 2-stage shutter release, a video button, and a custom dial that can control aperture, exposure, and other things. What's really handy as well is the lanyard in the box. I had this thing in my jacket pocket and the lanyard was hanging out, and I would loop my hand in, take a photo by automatically firing up the camera along pressing the shutter button, and then put my phone back so quickly, so much less fiddly than using a touch screen. So it really does does go beyond just the camera hardware here. It's an entire experience. The photo quality has also impressed me so much. In the past, Xiaomi phones had either been too vibrant with Leica Vibrant or too muted with Leica Authentic. And while it isn't perfect, I would have liked a middle ground for this phone. Xiaomi's new AI-SP image processing really does bring their A game to this phone, better than anything I've ever seen from Xiaomi in the past, which I'm sure is helped along by the incredible hardware in here. It's also worth noting that now, whether you pick up the best camera phones in the world from Vivo, Oppo, or Xiaomi, you're going to get an incredible experience, each with its own individual look. Vivo, for example, is more computational, looks really, really incredible. Oppo's more balanced, and Xiaomi's is more old school photography. Contrast is a little bit higher. It doesn't pull out as much from the shadow to create that super HDR look, but I still really love how characteristic and textured the shots from this phone look. I thought I'd be using the main camera 99% of the time on this phone, but what I found myself doing, thanks to Xiaomi's really great photo processing and that photographer kit, is switching across them, zooming, and not even thinking about which camera I was engaging with, because I was still getting reliable shots. So it really is the first phone that feels like a true camera system, largely helped by that photography kit with that zoom lever, which just floats between each camera beautifully. Now, don't get me wrong, photos from the main camera look incredible. Loads of depth of field thanks to that sensor size. The variable aperture does make a difference, predominantly in video, but also in photos as well. You can create that extra bit of depth, or you can get more in focus, and the dynamic range is so good. I really love shooting raw in this thing, but even in automatic mode with that contrast ramped up, you still had salvageable detail in the shadows. I really enjoyed the main camera. What impressed me more though were the telephoto cameras, because I wasn't expecting them to be so good. When I was using the 75mm and 120mm cameras, it was able to take a really crisp shot, even with subjects that were moving quite a bit. Now, I had to take a couple of shots to get it, but once I did, whether it was a pet, a person, a branch that was moving a little bit in the wind, I was so impressed pinching into the shot and seeing that detail it captured. It's also respectable at night, which a lot of zoom cameras aren't, and that quality extends to the ultra wide too. Having the same sensor across all the telephoto and ultra wide cameras ensures some consistency in the look, but also autofocus across all of them, like I said, creates a versatility that really is best in class. And I think Samsung, Google and Apple could really learn a thing or two from what Xiaomi's doing on this phone. Video you record on this phone also looks so good, especially from that main camera. The 1-inch sensor matched with the versatility of that variable aperture means in bright and dark situations, you're going to get such good looking low noise results, but also very little blown out content too. And it's able to shoot log in pro mode. You can control that aperture manually as well. So versatile. 4K held together really nicely, stabilized, and the front camera also shoots 4K, which hasn't been the case on a lot of past Xiaomi devices.
This is an 8K video being shot on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. Now, this thing has so many video modes. It can shoot HDR video, it can shoot 8K at up to 30 frames per second, log video, but the 8K is interesting because this could be the first phone I've used which can capture 8K that's actually really usable. On a tripod especially, because it's going to have that extra stabilization to capture all the detail that makes 8K worthwhile. Handheld, you're going to see a little bit of handshake come through, especially when I start doing stuff like walking. But in good light, 8K video, you're able to crop a fair bit more into it. And even handheld, it doesn't look terrible. That 1-inch sensor really coming through there. It won't perform as well, especially on the telephoto cameras where it has to contend with zoom reach too. When it comes to file sizes, it's about 600 megabytes for a minute of 8K video. And as you can see, it looks pretty solid handheld. The stabilization looks pretty solid. Micro judders, though, are going to hold it back from being really croppable. It's also worth noting that you can't shoot HDR, you can't shoot 60 frames per second in 8K, so it does have other limitations, and you can't switch out between your cameras once you've started recording an 8K video, though each camera can shoot 8K.
So all in all, this is such a great camera phone. Now, I will say the thing that could tip it over the edge and make it near perfect is if the photography kit had a tripod thread, but even without that, this is still the option for photographers looking for the best phone on the market for photographs and probably video too if you want the manual control and manual aperture that the iPhone doesn't give you. Powered by a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 from Qualcomm, this is a flagship through and through, and with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage, multitasking right through to filling up this thing with apps and games, it's made to last and perform very well. Now, this is no gaming phone. I found Xiaomi applies a fair bit of throttling when gaming, and you really need to turn performance mode on to get the best from it. And like I've already said, the shape, the grip, the speakers being easy to cover up, ergonomically, it's not the best gaming phone around either, but it's still going to play back top tier games very well. One thing that's a little bit harder to overlook is the lack of eSIM support on here, something that's pretty much a staple in every 2024 flagship, and it's in the Xiaomi 14, so I have no idea why Xiaomi missed it out on this thing. Another aspect of the 14 Ultra that I'm not in love with is HyperOS on top of Android 14, and specifically it does some weird things. For example, it wants to serve me ads in my lock screen carousel and it's opt out of those ads, which is really bizarre. This is not a cheap phone. This is not a Poco that's subsidized. This is a flagship that costs £1,299. Also, if I want to change my wallpaper, I have to interact with the Themes app, which then requests cookies access. It's just not like something I want to be doing on a premium phone. Also, when I want to search the app tray for an app that's uninstalled, it takes me to Xiaomi's App Mall rather than the Google Play Store. Even phones like the Honor Magic 6 Pro gives me an option of which app store to go to. Now, I don't love that, but it's definitely better than not being served the Google Play Store. So while Xiaomi's HyperOS is very smooth, stable, I had no issues day to day. If you really want the most kind of refined experience that doesn't feel like it's pushing stuff in your face, it probably isn't the one to go for. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra comfortably lasts the day with that 5000 mAh battery. You may struggle with a day of heavy photographing and gaming to get through a full day, so it really benefits from that battery bump that you get from the photography kit battery grip. With 90 watts wired charging and a charger in the box and 80 watts wireless charging, you can get a full charge in around 35 minutes, so it absolutely runs rings around the best from Apple and Samsung. And in summary, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra is the best phone around if you're a photographer. It's that simple. A lot of that does come down to the camera grip, and this should hopefully put a lot of pressure on other manufacturers to be as holistically thoughtful as Xiaomi's been with this phone. It's packed best-in-class hardware in here with that main camera and that stepless variable aperture, and that photography kit elevates things to another level, making it feel like a camera as well as perform like a camera. And also, it's worth saying, if you already have an iPhone and you want a secondary camera for